Hey everyone, welcome back to AI Insights. This is season 3 and we're starting our first episode one strong because we're starting with our segment interviewing people around the world in tech. And today I'm here together with Kanan. Kanan, can you introduce yourself? She's a really awesome person.
Thank you so much, Fleur. It's amazing to be on the podcast. I've seen it, on social media, and finally I'm on the podcast. So thank you for calling me. It's exciting. So basically, I'm working right now in multiple capacities. So I'll start with the beginning that I'm a lawyer by training, and I started to work after that in management consultancy, and then I did work for the policy organizations, and then I realized I wanted to practice law. So I started to kind of work as a barrister in India, saw a variety of different cases, variety of different social segments also. And I realized maybe through entrepreneurship and through technology, certain legal processes can be, restructured, which are more user friendly. So I started
Mhm.
long story, but 3 different organizations, some non-profits, some for-profits, and some research focused organizations to just look at how technology and design thinking and generally innovation can be instilled in legal aspects. And then I was not sure how things will go, but my experience has taught me that people are really open to communication. They are very interested in knowing more about legal innovation. And then there are those who are like law and innovation and tech don't really go together. But, over the years, I've worked with people who've invested in legal tech. I've worked in
Mhm.
legal tech in different parts of the world also. And most recently, I've been living, in fact, in The Hague since last 6.5 years. And most recently, I've been working with the Hague University of Applied Sciences as senior lecturer legal tech, and now as a researcher in legal tech. And I'm also setting up a fund to support legal tech startups. So my journey has been in tech, but from the legal perspective. So I think that kind of gives a summary of my background, and I'm excited about talking more.
Thanks so much for your introduction. Yeah, I remember when you met me when you talked about legal tech. I was like, I didn't know there was an aspect of the tech industry that really focused on the law part. I thought that's like goes to lawyers and that's where mostly is being talked about. So, but what made you decide to go into legal tech?
Very interesting. I was just focused on solving the problems. In the
Mhm.
beginning, I thought my first organization, I thought, how do I know of solution creation? Of course, I feel passionately about solving the problem, but what would really work? So the first organization was just researching different legal systems across the world on how incentive structures are created, how technology is coming up. And in fact, at the time, Fleur, technology kept on coming up as one of the solution providers in different countries, and in even basic technology. So for
Mhm.
example, how telephone helplines can help, how basic digitization of court records can help. And that made me realize, what if you kind of take it a little further down? And now we see a plethora of legal tech, offered, and I'm happy, like we will talk about it. But in the beginning, to answer your question, I was just focused on solving the problem, and tech kept coming up as a very scalable, very user friendly, even a solution provider. So that's when I started to realize, okay, I need to take tech a little seriously, need to know a little more about
Mhm.
to solve the problem I want to solve.
Okay, because you really saw that there was more seriousness compared to how at the time people were looking at the problem.
Exactly right. So the research organization that I started made me realize that tech was a solution provider. But then again, to kind of go a little deeper into it, with that
Mhm.
research organization, we found a lot of people interested. We used to do a lot of focus group. We used to work with the governments also, and different tech friendliness and tech penetration within different departments, within different segments of the society came into light. What remained a challenge was the right business model around legal tech. So the
Mhm.
first, experiment with research was successful in terms of how it was able to reach a lot of people, get government contracts also, and start to work on really impactful areas. But then I realized, okay, how can I make a standard form or uniform kind of a tool that can reach a lot of people at the same time? And that kind of was the entrepreneurial hat that I started to wear in law. Was just a practicing lawyer, and my understanding with technology was fairly basic, fairly limited, average really. But again, when we started to think, okay, now of course we need to create something which can be uniform, which can scale, which can reach a lot of people. But at the time, different ideas came, and the idea of creating a comic book on law kind of really stuck with us. And we started to work with different designers, different comic artists. Again, when you are an entrepreneur, of course, you realize you have to just solve one problem first and solve it really, really well. Create one
Mhm.
solution that can reach different market segments. Be very clear about the market segment that you want to reach. and try to understand what their needs are, then how your solution can actually address their needs. So in the beginning, we just took the market segment of young children between the age of 10 to 14. We felt comfortable working with this target segment because we were anyway going to schools and telling children about laws and rights. And that's when the
Mhm.
idea of, okay, what can we create for young children? And maybe they would love comics. And we did a lot of pilots, which kind of successfully showed multiple times that they loved comic books. In fact, what we tried to do was to offer like a educational supplement, what they were anyway studying in their textbook, and giving like comic stories around this with educational messages. But at the time, Fleur, this was just a comic book, physical comic book that we created. And then we had
Yeah.
partners who distributed this. And we again had big contracts where millions of copies were distributed across India. And the scale is very important here. First, Lawtoons that we created, we reached about 20,000, 30,000 people, or at least 30,000 copies were distributed. But in a country of 1.4 billion, it is still not a big number. That's when we started to work on public-private partnerships, and the outreach and the scale improved significantly. But then again, as I told you in the beginning, it was just a physical comic book. Publishers, even by using digital outreach, we could not reach the large number of people where they were at. And that's when the idea of Law for Me came about, which is where we also tried to bring technology in solving day-to-day legal problems. And that came about with different sort of questions that we had to answer and different sort of, solutions that we had to create. Maybe I could tell you a little
Mhm.
about the Law for Me experiment a little bit here.
Yeah. No, I'm just I was looking at the cartoons that you showed, the Law Tunes. It looks really funny. Like when I well, funny and also serious and also very helpful at the same time. I was looking at the English translation of it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we tried to keep it really, really interesting for kids. And to do that funny part, couple of things. So my sister and I
Mhm.
started to write stories. So we are not comic artists, we are storytellers, and we are,
Mhm.
people who can simplify the laws. So first we have to decide, okay, what law we need to simplify. And as I told you, we were trying to do an educational supplement, what kids were anyway studying between their school years of 10 to 14. So constitution kind of came up to be a very necessary and easily approachable topic. Everybody should know the constitution and the rights. So we took, okay, let's talk about the first 5 rights in the first law tunes. But then what stories do we create? What characters do we create? How do we tell this story? So for that, what we did was we created stories based on our own life experiences. And why this is important is because then it's relatable. It's genuine. And we knew firsthand what had happened in those situations. So for example, eventually in the second Law Tunes, we created, a school trip, which we had gone
Mhm.
to. So it's very, very relatable. But even the characters, even the side characters, how they looked like, what they wore, what would they say in different situations. There's a lot of psychology involved. And then we met a lot of child psychologists as well, talked to a lot of parents, talked to a lot of kids to say, okay, how do we tell this story? And one thing that came up again and again is that children don't like to be told what to do. They will prefer to think of their own, and then they decide what
Mhm.
they want to do. So we were like, okay, then who should tell about law? Because law is so heavy, people don't like to interact with law. So
Yeah.
how can we make it simple yet fun? So then again, the inspiration came of creating like a ghost of a judge who lives in a constitution book, and then he appears out of nowhere in a child's life, and he would just ask questions and leave it at questions. And the kid will figure out on himself, what the answer is. And, people who loved Lawtoons was precisely because of this reason, that it was not preaching anything. No parent, no teacher, no elder sibling telling what to do. Kids would figure
Mhm.
out on their own, make mistakes and still learn. So yeah, that is how we made it really funny and the humor came.
No, that's so no, I really love how you guys are able to bring the material to kids in a simple way. Because I do know I remember teaching kids, AI training, like, okay, how can you use ChatGPT best without using it for cheating at school? And kids were like, "No, I wanna try everything." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you have to think about this part as well, the critical thinking."
Yeah.
Where kids could, like, learn how to code. It was really interesting. And that they were more busy with experimenting, exactly what you said.
Yeah, exactly. And kids come up with such nice questions. And sometimes you will also start to think, okay, how do I solve this? But yeah, now there are such amazing ed tech tools available. So yeah, I can talk more about the next experiment I had after that.
Yeah, no, definitely, tell me more about the next experiment.
Yes. So basically, we were like, now we have to bring technology. There are amazing ed tech platforms available. But then the
Mhm,
heart was still in solving everyday legal challenges of people, the kind of issues that I'd seen in my work as a practicing lawyer. So I realized, okay, how can I bring technology to the problem that I want people to solve. But this became very interesting where we wanted to really use technology. We wanted to, this was way back in 2015. Apps were coming up, but website was like easily approachable medium for a lot of people. But then people who had online access or internet access, they wanted different kinds of problems solved, but not access to justice problem. For example,
Mhm.
when we did a survey, people said, okay, online, I want to do my text filing easily. I want to understand my cyber rights easily, which is fair enough. Naturally, those are people who don't have access to justice issues on a day-to-day basis. But then if you want to do more, let's say housing issue, employment issue, now things have changed. But at the time, people still prefer to go to a physical lawyer, meaning somebody they know, somebody they trust,
Yeah.
and won't think that online can provide those kind of solution. And that has been with the tech, Fleur. Honestly, 2015, 2016, that trust conversation kept coming up. Can I trust something that I read online? Do you think that it will be an easy solution? But now in 2025, we are at a place where we are okay with giving our information, and then there are other challenges with that. But we are more trusting of technology, and it has taken time.
This is also when you set up the research foundation in India.
So the first was the research foundation, then came Law Tunes, and the third one was Law for Me. With Law for Me, what happened was that it didn't scale very well because, there was a mismatch between the kind of problems we wanted to solve and kind of problems people online wanted to solve.
Mhm.
But Law for Me actually won a grant of a Dutch organization called the Hague Institute for Innovation of Law. So they would choose select legal innovations from across the world, bring them to the Peace Palace. We make a pitch here. So it was very prestigious at the time. And I was one of the awardees and recipients of the grant.
Nice.
So it was fairly exciting to then have funding to build, and we built a fantastic website and an app and things like this, but it didn't scale. So this kind of kept in my mind as to how can I scale justice tech, B2C solution in law. And eventually I kept in contact with that Dutch organization, and they first asked me to do scoping of legal tech solutions in Asia, South Asia specifically. And then
Mhm.
they eventually hired me. So I moved to the Netherlands, and we set up, I was part of the team setting up accelerators to build solutions around law and justice in different parts of the world, specifically in Africa and Middle East, and also work with policymakers that I had done before to say, okay, this is a very interesting justice solutions. How can we scale it? And again,
Mhm.
technology was an important part of how, the young innovators and startups will think about solving, let's say, housing issue or land issue or domestic violence issue. So one of the things we realized, maybe we don't need a lot of high technology, like sophisticated technology, but we needed to create something simple that would meet people where they are at. And
Mhm.
that is where, a lot of learning took place. So yeah, that is where the Law for Me experiment ended up taking me to the Hague, and start to look at globally what is happening in the area of legal tech and justice tech.
So pretty much The Hague became for you like the capital of legal tech, in fact.
Yes, I think it was a fantastic platform for me to see what is happening across and what kind of different experiments are done in different countries. And yeah, as I told you, the funded innovation unfortunately did not scale. So I was very curious
Mhm.
to see, okay, what are the other awardees like now that I had access to who was funded, where they were at, and some of my predecessors in the organization had done a phenomenal work to document everything. And for me, then was the next step to reach out to these people and then convince people in the inside to say, can we research as to why some of these legal tech are not scaling and not successful, but then those who are, why they are successful. So there is this concept in the VC world, right, that if you invest in 10 startups, only one will be successful. I mean, sometimes
Mhm.
even in the Silicon Valley, 100 startups and a couple of them will be very successful. So then so we can of course go till the end of the day discussing why those startups fail. But what is really interesting is that why those one or two succeed, what do they do right that they succeed? So that is the research that I ended up working on with the research director at the Hague Institute, and
Mhm.
fascinating insights came. And to kind of put in a nutshell, and I'm also very curious to elaborate, but then we came up with 7 categories of justice solutions, online and offline. So different varying degrees of working with technology that would scale no matter the jurisdiction. And that is what became quite fascinating to deep dive into. And then the different governments also asked us to do more of this study. So this game changer categories that we developed around justice tech became a lot of excitement for me and also for some of the others in the organization.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds super interesting. Is this a paper you can find online that our listeners can look into? Because we have quite a few people who are founders and entrepreneurs who are also listening to this podcast. So I would definitely know that they'd be like, let me look into that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's called Digital Technologies and Judicial Reform. I'll send it
Hmm.
to you after this conversation so you can also cross post it and
Yeah,
yeah, share.
awesome.
Because we did a lot of work around this, but this paper contains it all. In this paper that I'm going to share with you, we have looked at 68 countries and then looked at, where the technology is at, what kind of technology is in law and justice
Hmm.
specifically. And let me kind of, say a little bit about legal tech and justice tech and what is the difference between the two. So now with the kind of technology that is available in law, I talked about the question of business model and having the right paying users. So what innovators and startup founders have started to do in law is to build for law firms, build for big organizations. And that is understandable because they have deep pockets and they also want to streamline their internal operations. There's a lot of legal research needs. So how can you find the right case for applicable for your current ongoing research questions, etc. So you can do prediction analysis, you can do so many things, document automation, digital signatures. And honestly, some of these companies have gone on to do an IPO in the US because there is so much of a need and it is really solving real world challenges. So of course, this digital signature was not there a few years ago. Would you call it a legal innovation? Well, it has made a huge impact in the world of law. So indeed, it is a legal tech. It has transformed a lot of industries on how contracts are created and signed and preserved, etc. In a way, those kind of technologies are generally known as legal technologies. What is now making rounds and it is very successful is document automation. Meaning, if a contract has to be written, there is so much of past knowledge. You can build a system where it can automatically create that contract for you. Of course,
Hmm.
ChatGPT also does. But then, if you build upon the foundation model through RAG and through small language models based trained on your firm specific data or just the legal data, then your hallucination problem also kind of is, how can you say, to some extent it is solved more accurately than on a general tool. And also the information stays on your internal cloud and you can build for your specific use cases. So many law firms are now doing that. And another question is around whether you buy from the existing vendor or you build for those companies specific around legal tech. And you see different kinds of solutions here. There are very big players. One of them now, they are working with big legal publishers like LexisNexis, Thomson Reuters, another very big legal publisher, have their own tools. So they acquired a startup and then
Hmm.
they are offering solution to their existing clientele. What some of these big publishers and big players in legal market are now doing is to acquire some of these legal tech companies so that it gives a leverage to them and also to their clients, because now clients are also asking. What has happened after chat gpt is that everybody says of the world for free. So government is mandated to make sure that people who want to access justice, they should be able to. In fact, some of the court staffs are kind of trained to say, okay, if there is somebody who is willing to look for solution, you should just guide them in the right direction. And there are technology interventions that are happening in the justice tech space, but
Hmm.
not as much. I mean, it could be at the court level or it could be at the individual level. We have seen some of the kiosks, some of the court management system, better digitization of the court records, etc. That's one aspect of it. Or the other aspect of it could be, can I have an app which can solve my housing problem? Or can I do something where, let's say, an online dispute resolution mechanism can help with divorce issues or internal conflicts between two people? So those are the kind of justice tech solutions that are different from legal tech because they're solving for people at large, but it's very difficult to build for them. Sometimes you don't need to create like a sophisticated, as I was saying earlier, even a chatbot can be very helpful or even a telephone helpline. So it's a low hanging fruit. And we've seen different experiments in different parts of the world. So global south is
Hmm.
different, global north is different, UK is different, US is completely different. And I'm very fortunate to have seen it all. And I'm still seeing it all as things are evolving so fast. So you can just know a little bit of the bigger scheme of things, but it's very valuable and super interesting as a lawyer. I started out as a lawyer, but now look how the world has changed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the past 5 years. I mean, 2021, ChatGPT came out, and for me, it feels felt like the world has changed ever since. Because I've also like when it comes to legal stuff, what you said, like justice tech, I've seen a lot of people using ChatGPT to write their cases. So instead of them hiring a lawyer, they just bring ChatGPT with them to represent them for them, just to save them some money.
Exactly. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
COVID also shifted a lot. And I was fortunate to kind of work on a very small research on what kind of technology courts included in their processes after COVID.
Mhm.
Because, see, there was no way to go to the court physically everywhere in the world. So, online trials started to take place, Zoom started to be used, and we saw so many different approaches again. Fascinating. And what we did was to look at high income countries, middle income countries, and low income countries, and what kind of tech integration the legal systems are having. And some of our findings were fascinating also. For example, we looked at how many countries did policy changes around tech, how many
Mhm.
countries did process changes around tech, how many were just administrative, how many were substantive. And we saw that in high income countries, actually a lot of countries in Europe, they first did a pilot to see, okay, is this tech working or not, is this something that is actually solving the needs that we have and is integrating
Mhm. Mhm.
more open to making policy changes that all the courts should be digital courts by 2030. We need to have, a lot of tech integrated, including AI. At the time, also,
Mhm.
they were saying things like this. This is 2020 and 2021, as we just mentioned. And then with Chat GPT, we've seen judges across the board using this technology, which also raises concerns because all of this is critical infrastructure of a country and all of these trade secrets going out. Yeah. And governance stuff coming out on commonly held platforms. So we have to be careful, especially with justice tech, what platform you use and who uses it how.
Yeah, because you also, when we were talking offline earlier, you also mentioned there's a huge difference between the different continents as well, and you were able to see that. Could you also elaborate on that more?
Yeah, so I'll first talk about the Europe versus US differences because I'm very interested in legal tech startups in general. I keep attending many legal tech startup events, Fleur. You know,
Yeah,
this is how also we first met.
yeah, I know how it goes.
Yes, exactly. And the community builds, and you meet different people who are then at the same wavelength as you. And it is very exciting. Here, there are some remarkable startups, at least from what I've seen in the Netherlands and even elsewhere, because I also interact with European legal tech associations and other people and communities in this part of the world. And indeed, there is a excitement to build for legal and justice, but there is also the compliance part that comes in. And we all know how innovators feel about compliance, although that gives an opportunity for compliance tech solutions, privacy tech solutions, or specific ESG focused tech solutions or climate tech solutions. Maybe you can't call them legal, but of course, they are actually helping you with regulations and making sure that you are adhering to all the requirements. So, yeah, the startups are building, but they are cautious. That is what I'm going to say about Europe. That is from my understanding. But UK, for example, is quite different because UK government has embraced legal tech like no other. The government is funding some of these legal tech communities to say, look, create big events, bring different startups. In fact, one of the legal tech communities in UK, they came to know that I'm interested in meeting some startups in this space.
Mhm.
For the free of cost, they said, look, meet these people. And that I found fascinating that they found it in their interest to make these connections and leverage their networks. And government, yeah, is really invested heavily in legal tech. They see that as one of the leverages of the country. But still, I would say that
Mhm.
in Africa also it's now taking shape. There are communities coming up, there are people who are building for it, and sometimes fascinating solutions, again applicable to their local legal needs. US is where all of the, how can you say, technology companies are also there, the big pockets are also there. And I've seen the rate of scale where legal tech companies which were built in 2022, 2023 are already at billions of dollars of valuation. And that just goes on to say the concentration of all of these legal tech providers in one part of the world. And that's how generally, unfortunately, if you see, it's like with technology. And these tools are now so prominent and so powerful, and they have the first mover advantage that law firms, let's say in India or elsewhere also, they would say, okay, we want to work with these tech that is based in California, and we'll just work with them because there is also an industry standard that they have created. So, yeah, this is the difference that I see. South America, see, I'm also part of something called the Legal Hackers Network. I'm one of the
Mhm.
board members. And we have the kind of community that is built in South America, which is so exciting. And again, very unique solutions are coming up. With law and justice, it is also important that things are not like super globalized, but you need to create very jurisdiction specific, local specific, and technology allows you to do that. In fact, now digital sovereignty is also a question when law and justice is at play. So, yeah, we'll see how big the scale becomes, but indeed, it helps in solving real world challenges, and which is what
Mhm.
really excites me.
Yeah, no, true. No, I wanted to also make comment. At least what I know from the legal part is that also there's like a rule that if you upload any kind of personal data, it has to be like on a localized server. So is that something you also see that legal companies are looking at when they imply, like you said, they, for example, want to work with Californian tech, but
Yes.
needs to then, I assume, run on Indian servers.
Yes, yes. I think there is awareness that is slowly building in. It's not as much as I would imagine or want it to be. But yeah, I think there is a lot of education that needs to take place and it's already taking place. So yeah, I think with some of the bigger firms, there is clearly a demand that the servers have to be in India, the data has to be localized, and things cannot be taken outside. But we have in India the Data Protection Act, but the guidelines and the rules under it have to be formed. But in Europe, of course, the
Mm-hmm.
GDPR mandates that there is an adequacy, and then there are only ways in which the data can be transferred outside. But India, we don't have it as yet as operational. So yeah, that creates some challenges. I also have to point out that there is a lot of how can you say careless use, if I may use this word, and across
Mm-hmm.
industries here of free tools like ChatGPT. I mean, even if organizations would say, please don't use it and then be careful and don't give the sensitive data. I think that just the convenience aspect of it, yeah, I've seen just people using it without realizing what they are doing. So again, education is necessary.
Yeah, you especially see that here, at least what I know in the Netherlands right now, in the government, there's a rule of we have to get AI literacy. Oh yeah, wait, it was due to the European Act. That was it.
Yes,
That all European countries have to give their government employees at least AI literacy courses when they're using an AI technology. Because, like you said, it sounds harmless putting in like people's email or any other kind of personal data, but if you're very good at prompt engineering, you can recreate and getting the personal data out of it.
exactly.
I mean, I have the same thing where my email, I get blasted with all kind of scam commercials and stuff, and I'm like, okay, just go to the bin.
Exactly, where is this coming from? And then, of course, there are newer challenges that come about in terms of how much they know about us and how much identity that they
Yeah.
can create around us. And of course, here, the EU AI Act in Europe makes sure that certain AI usages are prohibited, but it's not everywhere. So, yeah, the subliminal technologies and other very scary and dangerous uses of AI,
Mhm.
it kind of builds up because the data is collected so regularly from, as you said, harmless platforms, and ultimately it ends up creating something which is beyond what we could imagine. AI literacy is absolutely critical, and it's fantastic that the EU AI Act spells this out. It's very costly to do, it's also resource incentive intensive to do, but I hope that there are some joining of hands happening, some communities are created. I think the work that you've been doing, Fleur, honestly, in kind of bringing people together for these discussions, these kind of platforms such as podcasts, is critical because this is all kind of an AI literacy or just conversations around these important topics that have to happen now.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like with a podcast, for example, it's very easy for people to just listen while they're in the car, in the train, or on their bike, and just wanting to listen to get a bit more of AI insights. I was actually also, I think this is the most amazing thing that also I saw on your LinkedIn profile is that you are now general partner at Freedom Ventures in India. Can you tell us a bit more about it? Because I remember you talked like a year ago about it to me, like you were starting with this. How is it going?
Yes, it's so exciting. It's so exciting. Finally, on the other side of the table. I mean, I've been in the accelerator part, but yeah, it's like, finally I'm able to support startups and support companies which are so aligned to the work that I've been doing for all of these years. How this happened is that in my LinkedIn, somebody in my community had done this particular course of a Palo Alto based VC firm called Decile Group, and
Mm-hmm.
they support emerging managers from different parts of the world. So first program was understanding the world of VC and seeing, how fund economics take place and what is thesis and how you can do the deal funneling and these kind of things, which was very nice. And it gave me a very nice, how can you say, background to understand how the world of venture capital works. Having even been a startup myself, and over I've started organizations and supported how the funding mechanism works and how venture capitalists think, was something that I thought I would never be able to be a part of. I would always see them as somebody who are very different from me. But then after doing this course, and then I was also selected for one of the residency requirements where I worked with a VC on the fund formation and the fund governance aspects. So that taught me a lot as
Mhm.
what kind of legal entities have to be created, what kind of compliances are there, which are favorable jurisdictions than others. So, for example, Delaware has, I think, numbers of VC funds, like 60% across the world and more, just because how favorable it is to do, the business for VC from there. So yeah, I learned all of this, and then I was mentioning to a friend that maybe one fine day I'll open my fund, and he said, "Why not now?" I said, "Look, I don't have any networks or contacts to raise funding. I don't know if I will be selected for the next program of the same firm." But then, lo behold, I got selected and then I took the leap of faith. So, yeah, indeed, the fund is coming along well, I could say. It's just that we are currently looking for a lot of interesting startups. For the first fund, we are focused on India. So, we are raising money in India, we are deploying money in India on Indian startups. But then I'm also having this global ambition where I want to bring some of these startups outside. I mean, US is the place, Fleur. I think, or even UK, as I told you, how government is invested in it.
Mhm.
Global South versus Global South collaboration could also be very helpful for justice tech solutions. So much is possible if we think globally, because so far law has been so jurisdiction specific, so country specific. But if we can abstract from it and build for different countries and different people, that will be so exciting. So maybe a lot of SaaS platforms, but again, we have to be careful if they are investable or not, and where our
Yeah.
investors make money. So yeah, that is what the journey of Rhythm Ventures has been so far.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting to hear also you saying, like, if you wanna go scale up, you have to go either US or UK if you wanna go global. So, everyone who's listening who's founder of entrepreneur, you have here some good advice.
Yes.
Yeah, so this was, by the way, already at the end of our podcast. So,
Right.
this was so much learned so much about legal tech. I've never really looked into it. Now I feel like, okay, I need to start reading more about it. So, I'm definitely gonna look reading into papers here.
Yes. I'll just say one last thing.
Yeah,
Everything is
sure.
available at a click of a button now. You can order food at a click of a button. You can order Ubers and taxis and flight tickets and everywhere. But justice and law is very different. The world is moving slowly and it's very traditional. Also, it's necessary because it is giving stability and giving it, you have to be accountable. But I think the younger generation and young people want to have accessible legal services and justice services. Hoping with the vision that we have that ease of approaching law and justice and technology again and again. I think it plays a very important role. Of course, you have to be careful what softwares you build and how you do it ethically from end to
Mhm.
end. But I think technology and law now go together so well. They always do. And I'm looking forward to how this pans out. So, yeah, that's something that I wanted to share also. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for making that last remark. I think it's definitely good advice for everyone because you never really think about legal, yeah, being more traditional, but it's also because mostly when there's a hearing, at least I'm going to say from my perspective, when there's a hearing, it can change your life for good or for bad with all legal consequences of it. But this is good to definitely dive into more into this topic. So I want to thank you so much for the interview, being part of our series, interviews across the world, to show more like what kind of careers in tech there is actually out there than just engineering or data science. So everyone else, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you on the next podcast for episode 2, which is also going to be really awesome. Great, bye.
Hey, thank you, Fleur.